In the early hours of March 20th, 2003, the quiet of the Baghdad night was shattered by explosions. Operation Iraqi Freedom had begun. The world watched, holding its breath, as a new chapter in modern history was violently written. But how did we get here? What were the forces, seen and unseen, that set this conflict in motion? This is the story of the Iraq War, a conflict that would redefine the 21st century. To understand the 2003 invasion, we must rewind more than a decade to 1990. Iraq, under the leadership of Saddam Hussein, invaded its small oil-rich neighbor, Kuwait. This act of aggression was met with swift international condemnation. The United Nations Security Council passed resolutions demanding Iraq's withdrawal, and when Saddam refused, a massive U.S.-led coalition was assembled. Operation Desert Storm was launched in early 1991, and in a matter of weeks, the Iraqi military was decisively defeated and pushed out of Kuwait, but the story didn't end there. Saddam Hussein remained in power. In the years that followed, a tense and uneasy peace settled over the region. The UN imposed strict sanctions on Iraq and established a no-fly zone to protect minority populations. Weapons inspectors were sent in, tasked with a critical mission to find and dismantle Iraq's suspected programs for weapons of mass destruction, ORWMDs, chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons. This created a decade-long cat-and-mouse game. Inspectors would report Iraqi obstruction and a lack of cooperation, fueling suspicion in Western capitals that Saddam was hiding something truly dangerous. Tensions would rise, military strikes would be threatened, and then things would cool down, only for the cycle to begin again. Then came September 11th, 2001, the devastating attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon fundamentally changed the world. In the United States, a new sense of vulnerability and a demand for security gripped the nation. The administration of President George W. Bush declared a war on terror. The initial focus was on al-Qaeda and their Taliban hosts in Afghanistan. But soon, attention began to shift back to Iraq. Key figures in the U.S. government began to publicly connect Saddam Hussein to terrorism and the pursuit of WMDs. The argument was made that in this new dangerous world, the risk of a dictator like Saddam obtaining weapons of mass destruction and potentially giving them to terrorists was a risk that could not be tolerated. Intelligence assessments, which would later be heavily scrutinized and proven deeply flawed, were presented to the public and to allies. These reports claimed with a high degree of certainty that Iraq possessed active WMD programs. The Axis of Evil speech in 2002 explicitly named Iraq as a grave and growing danger. The diplomatic pressure intensified. The U.S. and its primary ally, the United Kingdom, pushed for a new, tougher UN resolution authorizing military force. But they faced significant opposition from other world powers like France, Germany, and Russia, who argued for giving weapons inspectors more time. The world was divided. Despite the lack of a clear UN mandate, the decision was made. President Bush delivered an ultimatum to Saddam Hussein and his sons. Leave Iraq within 48 hours, or face military action. The deadline passed. The initial invasion, dubbed Shock and Awe, was a display of overwhelming military power. The coalition forces advanced rapidly, and on April 9th, 2003, the iconic statue of Saddam Hussein in Baghdad's Firdos Square was pulled down, a powerful symbol of the regime's collapse. To many, it seemed like a swift and decisive victory. President Bush famously declared the end of major combat operations. But the reality on the ground was far more complex. With the collapse of the Ba'athist government, a power vacuum was created. Law and order broke down. Widespread looting and chaos ensued. Key decisions made by the coalition authorities, such as disbanding the Iraqi army and banning members of the Ba'ath Party from government roles, had profound consequences. Hundreds of thousands of trained, armed men were suddenly unemployed and disenfranchised, creating a fertile recruiting ground for a new and violent insurgency. The initial justification for the war, the double, never materialized. Extensive searches across the country turned up nothing. The intelligence had been wrong. This discovery fundamentally undermined the credibility of the invasion and fueled intense debate and criticism both at home and abroad. As the years went on, the situation in Iraq devolved from a post-conflict stabilization mission into a brutal and multifaceted civil war. The insurgency grew more sophisticated and deadly. Sunni and Shia militias battled for control, targeting each other and coalition forces with roadside bombs, suicide attacks, and kidnappings. The violence reached a horrific peak between 2006 and 2007, with sectarian cleansing tearing communities apart. Names like Fallujah, Ramadi, and Sadr City became synonymous with some of the most intense urban warfare of the modern era. In 2007, the U.S. implemented a new strategy known as the Surge. Tens of thousands of additional American troops were deployed to Iraq, primarily in Baghdad, with the aim of quelling the sectarian violence and providing security for the population. The Surge, combined with a movement of Sunni tribes who turned against al-Qaeda in Iraq, did lead to a significant reduction in violence. A fragile stability began to take hold. By 2009, U.S. forces began to draw, handing over security responsibilities to the newly trained Iraqi army and police. In December 2011, the last American combat troops left Iraq, officially ending the nearly 9-year-long war. But the legacy of the conflict is deep and enduring. The war cost hundreds of thousands of lives, the vast majority of them Iraqi civilians. It displaced millions, reshaped the political map of the Middle East, and had a staggering financial cost, estimated in the trillions of dollars. It also gave rise to new and even more extreme threats. Al-Qaeda in Iraq, a group that didn't exist in the country before the invasion, morphed and evolved into the brutal entity that would later be known as ISIS, which would go on to seize vast territories in Iraq and Syria, plunging the region back into chaos. The Iraq War remains one of the most controversial events of our time. It raises profound questions about the use of military force, the role of intelligence, the responsibilities of occupying powers, and the unpredictable consequences of intervention. It's a story with no easy answers, a conflict whose aftershocks are still being felt today, in the lives of the people who lived through it and in the very fabric of our world. Thank you for watching. If you found this documentary informative, please subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Join us next time as we continue to explore the pivotal moments that have shaped our history.